The number one mistake I see people make when it comes to fitness and movement is chasing perfect form. Today, I'm going to give you a drastically different way of looking at movement that will decrease your stress and increase your overall longevity. But first, I have to explain to you what perfect form means and why most people who say that are wrong and why that concept is complete rubbish. If you've ever set foot in a gym or a yoga studio or a Pilates facility, odds are you have been visited by the police. And I don't mean the actual police unless you're going into the wrong bathrooms or you're staring creepily and awkwardly at everyone else while they're working out. What I'm talking about is the form police. These are the people that will tell you, that's not the right way to do that exercise, or that's the wrong way. Let me give you a better way of doing that thing so that you don't injure yourself. There is such a small, minuscule amount of research that actually connects movement, form, and technique to injury risk or even quality of outcome. So just right on the onset, you can assume that when people have these ideas about what constitutes a perfect movement, they're probably thinking in terms of this is what's perfect for this style or this technique of movement, okay? If you have a yoga pose or a yoga position, there's a certain way to do that pose or that position to accomplish that end goal. But that doesn't mean that that's perfect for the sake of what your body is capable of. And so it's very important that you realize that when people tell you this is perfect, they're actually talking about a standard set by the style of training or movement, not by what your body actually needs. And this is why the idea of perfect form is such a poorly defined term. It doesn't really make sense, the idea that there's only one way to move a certain way. Because everyone's different. Everyone moves differently. Everyone has a different goal. Everyone has a different starting point. And not even getting into the neurology, which we're about to, it doesn't make sense that you would put everybody in the same boat of what they should do or not do. So you want to ask yourself, A, what is the goal of that movement in the first place? Am I doing that modality of training because I want to get better at that training? Maybe it's a martial art or gymnastics or dance. Well, then you're going to have very specific parameters for what's considered successful movement or not. If you don't have that specific training goal, then what's considered acceptable can be much broader and more wide ranged. If you're just doing it for health, if you're just doing it for overall fitness or reducing injury risk, your options are greater. You also need to understand that your unique anatomy matters. The depth of your hip capsule matters. The angle of the femoral neck, the bone that's holding your leg to your hip, that's going to be different from person to person. So that matters for what you're capable of doing. Where certain muscles attach, you might be slightly off compared to somebody else, and they might have a great deal of leverage mechanically that you don't. And that's normal and that's okay. But that's part of why we don't want to hold ourselves to somebody else's standard, especially if they have the joint anatomy or the muscular anatomy to be more flexible or stronger in those positions than we are. So here's what I want you to do. We're going to try this, okay? I want you to go ahead and imagine you're doing a traditional fitness shoulder press, okay? Go ahead and move your arm like that. Notice how it feels, okay? Then we're going to do a traditional kettlebell training press. So your arm's going to come down here. Imagine you're holding that kettlebell and you're pressing. So now my question for you is this: which one is correct? For some of you, you might say the first form was correct. For some of you, you might say, oh no, the second one is correct. What if I told you neither one is correct? Real quick, my goal is to grow this channel to the point where I can get 1 million people out of pain. The fact is, even though most of you watching this are currently subscribed to this channel, the number of viewers we're getting is growing. While that's great for getting the word out, the number of subscribers we need to get to that point, to reach that goal, is far greater than what we currently have. If you want to support this channel and you want to support that goal and help me help more people, I would love it if you would hit that subscribe button. The bulk of the fitness industry is still stuck in this model that muscles are what drive movement, which makes sense. It sounds like a plausible thing that your muscle contracts and moves the joint and moves the bone, and that's what propels you forward. The problem with that notion is that muscles are subservient to the nervous system. What that means is they don't fire on their own. They fire because the signals through the spinal cord, through the peripheral nerve, tell that muscle to contract or relax. So whatever a muscle does comes from higher up, comes from a different system altogether. So while we think about this is the best way to move the muscle, we're missing the point that the muscle is controlled by a higher order system known as your brain. And this is something I learned very early on. If we want to get stronger, if we want to get more flexible, your brain has to do the heavy lifting. It's not the muscles that control those things, it's your nervous system. I remember taking a course when I was younger on the nervous system, and it was a course on movement through a brain-based lens, through an organization called Z Health. I took their course, and at the very first course, the instructor there, he told me, he said, if you do good joint mobility, you move really well, you will get stronger. I said, well, I could just lift weights and get stronger, couldn't I? He said, yeah, but if you move better, you'll get stronger without having to lift heavy weights. So I thought to myself, that sounds like a bunch of BS. My next class with that organization was 3 months later. So I did nothing but joint mobility drills for 3 months. I did nothing about really fine motor control work for 3 months because my goal was in that 3-month time frame, I was going to test that theory. I thought it was wrong. I thought it was BS. I thought I wouldn't get stronger. So I got home from that course. I checked my kettlebell strength. I said, all right, I'm pressing a 72-pound kettlebell, or a 32-kilo bell for those of you on the metric system. I pressed that 72-pound bell. I did 12 weeks of joint mobility work, and before I flew out to that next course, thinking I was going to tell him he was wrong, I pressed an 84-pound kettlebell. I had never done that in my life. I was like, whoa, that's crazy. I got stronger, and I didn't lift weights. I didn't train my muscles in a traditional sense. I only trained movement and motor control. So in that time frame, I thought, okay, I'm not going to touch any weights. The only time I picked up a weight was to show a client an exercise. And I just did all of this joint mobility work for every joint in my body. And when I went out to that class, I was stronger as a result of it. And that's when I realized that what had happened was my nervous system became more effective, became more efficient at controlling my body. That's when I realized that it's not the muscle that controls things. The muscle is just the lever. The muscle is just doing what it's told. But if the system that controls the muscle doesn't know how to actually control that joint, it's not going to be good at doing so. And so most fitness models are built around, let's get as much work into the muscle as possible, but they ignore that the reason the muscle's not working is not because you're not doing enough work, it's because the nervous system that controls that muscle doesn't know what it's supposed to do well. And I'm going to show you some of my favorite motor control drills here in just a moment so you can start that process yourself. But first, let's talk a little bit about how movement works in the brain. So let's go ahead and have you take your left hand and open and close your hand. Open and close and make a fist, open that hand all the way. Now, in that process, my left hand is getting the signal to do that from my right cortex, okay? My right cortex controls movement on the left side of my body. And conversely, my left cortex controls movement on the right side of my body. Now, why that matters is because when I have an issue in my movement, I want to know where in the brain I need to look for solutions, okay? Inside of your brain holds maps. It holds these virtual representations of different parts of your body. So those maps need to be very, very clear for your brain to know how to actually control that part of your body. If those maps are blurry, your brain doesn't know what to do with that part of your body. It doesn't know how to open and close that hand well. It doesn't know how to create that shoulder press well. It doesn't know how to actually relax a tissue well, because the brain doesn't even know where that tissue really is or what it's capable of. And so when you have blurry maps, you're more likely to have movement problems and you're more likely to have pain. If you don't have good maps in the brain for a certain area, pain in that area is more likely. Conversely, if you have clear maps in the brain for that area of the body, you're more likely to get stronger with that area. You're more likely to have more flexibility in that area. And you're more likely to have good overall quality of movement in that area. You'll have more speed, you'll have more explosiveness, you'll have more relaxation, you'll have better blood flow and circulation. Basically, all the things we want from training. So when it comes to clarifying those maps, the quality and complexity of the movement matters. Okay, so think, for example, if I am doing very linear movement, I'm doing a bicep curl. There's not a lot of complexity involved with that. There's not a lot of detail that the brain has to pay attention to make that movement happen. But if I'm moving my elbow in a circular motion, there is a great deal of complexity there that the brain has to coordinate. It has to say, no, I have to do this with this bone and this with this bone and time that a certain way. And if I go the other way, there's a lot of complexity involved with coordinating that movement. The more complex the movement, the more the brain has to clarify how to control the body. Most fitness training, if you look at any gym, it's very linear, it's very non-complex. There's not a lot of problem solving involved with controlling the body. And as a result, the brain doesn't get the stimulation it needs to actually clarify those maps. So what ends up happening is my linear training, I get really good at this motion, but I miss all of this other stuff that my elbow or other joints are capable of. So I build these peaks of what I'm really good at, but I also create these valleys in which these are the things I never train. These are the things that I don't have good awareness of in the brain. The more valleys you have, and the deeper those valleys, the more blurry the maps. The more blurry the maps, the worse the movement, the greater the likelihood of pain. So if we want to improve your movement quality, improve your athleticism, improve your performance, and get rid of pain, we need to shore up those valleys. We need to build more peaks, but we also need to shore up those valleys. So the difference between what's clear and what's not clear becomes fewer and further in between. We want that to be as close to the same as possible. We want you to have good maps for everything. If you have good maps for everything in your brain, anything becomes possible. But the lower the clarity, the less options you have for movement. The other thing that leads to clear maps is variety. Variety is the spice of life. Novelty in your movement or in any other sensory modality is a great way to get your brain to pay attention. It's a great way to get your brain to learn, to change, to adapt. And that's why I say there's no perfect way to do a press. Because if I only press one way because I was told it's the perfect way, I'm going to build a peak, but I'm also going to have valleys. So instead, we want to think that there's not one perfect way to do a press. There's just lots of different ways to do a press. And you want to practice them all. You want to do some of these. You want to do some of these. You want to do some bench press. You want to do some dumbbell press, some kettlebell press, some band work. You want to have variety in your training so that you're actually stimulating your brain in a different way every time. That will give you more variety. That will give you more clarity. That will build better maps. But if I only use one type of implement or one type of training, my map clarity isn't going to be very high. I'm going to have a lot of blurriness because of that. So we want clarity that comes from variety in training. And we see this in lots of different sports or activities. Take a look at some of the best football players out there. Take a look at Barry Sanders. His movement maps were exceptionally clear. Look at some of these tennis players and some of the lunges that they're able to do and the movements they're able to perform. They are able to move in ways that most people aren't ever training intentionally. We see this in basketball. We see this in curling, of all things. And if you really want a great example of unique, eclectic, broad variety of movement, look at dancing, and especially break dancing. I'm a big fan of break dancing, not because I'm a break dancer myself, but because I can appreciate and respect the movement quality that you have to have in order to be a break dancer means you're training your body in lots of different ways. All right, now let's do some lunge work. In a typical fitness setting, what you're going to think of with lunges is your traditional 90-degree bend in the front leg, 90-degree bend in the back leg. If you do this in a gym setting with a personal trainer, with a traditional fitness approach, they're going to tell you, you've got perfect form. But the thing is, when is the last time you found yourself in real life in this position? Can you think of one sport where you're exactly in this position? No. Why do we train this then? Well, when you look at lunging as an athletic movement, there's a lot broader application for how to actually lunge. Neurologically, we want your brain to be capable of doing anything that your hip needs to do, anything that your knee needs to do, and anything that your foot and ankle needs to do. So we're going to expand your movement library today. I'm going to show you what I call a neuro lunge. So, easy way to think of this, if you're standing here, you're standing in the middle of a compass, okay? If you don't have room around you to do this, pause the video, go find room, and do these exercises because they will improve your brain instantly. So, I'm standing here in the middle of my compass. I have a north trajectory, I have a south trajectory. I also have an east, and I also have a west, and I have diagonals in between. Now, what we're going to do today is we're going to expand your lunge potential. Okay, so instead of always going forward or backward, we're going to start adding diagonals and lateral movements to your lunge template. So first thing we're going to do is an anterior 45 lunge. I'm going to step forward at an angle. So I'm going to keep my back foot where it was when I started. My back leg is going to stay straight, and my front leg is going to be basically in that lunge position. Here's what it looks like from the side. So you can see I'm not quite at 90 degrees. The back leg is straight back there. I've got a lot of weight on this front leg, but this is a position you're going to see far more likely to occur in everyday life or sport. So we want to actually practice that. Now, I could step, I could lunge, and that's one option. But because we want variety, we want to have more clarity in all of these maps, I want to start looking at ways I can change this. So in this case, my feet are facing forward. But what if I were to lunge and have my feet facing outward? That's now a different lunge. Now, which one's better? Depends on what you're practicing, but if you're looking for variety, if you're looking for brain map clarity, you want to be good at all of them. But what if, instead of my leg going out, I point my foot in while I lunge? There might be times, say you're slipping on ice, or you have to catch yourself from falling over or avoid stepping on something where you might be a little bit rotated. Having that variety in your movement, really important for your brain. But if you never practice this, you're not going to have a map for it. Your brain is not going to know, how do I coordinate all of that and safely get you to navigate around whatever child or animal or sharp objects on the floor that you're trying to avoid. So we want to actually start practicing multiple positions. Lateral movement, same idea. I could step out, load myself up on this. This is going to be far more likely to be something you see in everyday life. I need to step away. I need to get away from something. So I need the ability to load up on that one leg. This is more likely to occur than, oh no, I'm in danger. Let me get into my 90-degree lunge. So perfect form really doesn't matter. Variety is what you want. And you can do the same thing. When I step over here, I could change which way my feet are facing. I could step out. I could also lunge over and step in. It just depends. You want to be good at all of it so that if you end up in these positions, for whatever reason, your brain doesn't freak out, your tissue can handle the load, and that you have a map for what your body is capable of. The more information your brain has, the better the maps your brain has, the less likely you are to have an injury. So as you can see, your body, it's not a fragile system, though it is protective. So stop treating it like it's a fragile system and start giving it variety, start giving it complexity, start giving it reasons to change and adapt and improve and clarify those maps. Because if your brain doesn't know how to move in a variety of ways, it'll put the brakes on your movement when you try to move in a variety of ways. Give it clear signals and it can make better decisions. Now that you understand how to make movement more complex through variety, you need to understand what type of variety is exactly what your nervous system needs. For that, you need to watch this video here.